I didn't think anything of it the first night I stayed in room 409. But when I woke up at 2:13 a.m. to the sound of someone quietly trying my door handle, I knew something wasn't right. I was in town for work, a small rainy coastal town that barely looked like it belonged in this decade. My company booked me into the Bayview Inn, an old, 3-story hotel that smelled faintly of salt water and mildew, the kind of place that still used brass keys instead of keycards. When I checked in, the receptionist, a woman in her 50s with deep crow's feet and a voice like she'd been smoking for 40 years, handed me my key without much small talk.
"Room 409, top floor, end of the hall," she said, sliding the key across the counter.
The hallway leading to my room was long and narrow, with faded blue carpet and dim wall sconces. My door was the last one before a window at the very end. When I stepped inside, the room smelled stale. Not dirty, just like no one had opened a window in years. That first night, I unpacked, called my wife, and fell asleep watching some mindless late-night TV. The sound woke me up, a faint metallic click, like the door handle turning. I froze. My heart started pounding in my ears. I sat up slowly, staring at the silhouette of the door in the faint light from the street lamp outside the window. The handle jiggled again, quietly, like someone was testing it. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking a little. The sound stopped. Whoever it was didn't answer, just walked away. I heard slow, muffled footsteps fade down the carpeted hallway. I told myself it was probably housekeeping who'd accidentally come to the wrong room, but it was 2 a.m. That didn't make sense. Still, I managed to go back to sleep. The second night was worse. I'd been at a client dinner that ran late. When I finally got back to the hotel around 11, I noticed the lobby was empty, except for the receptionist from before. She gave me a strange look when I walked past, like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. That night, I woke again at almost exactly the same time, 2:12 a.m. I don't know what stirred me, but my eyes opened just in time to see the shadow of 2 feet at the crack under my door. I froze in bed, barely breathing. The handle turned slow, deliberate. This time, I heard a faint, wet breathing on the other side. Not fast or panicked, just steady. I whispered, "Go away," before I could stop myself. The breathing paused. The shadow didn't move. Then, finally, the feet shifted, and I heard them walk away. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I went down to the front desk. "Someone keeps trying to get into my room in the middle of the night," I told the receptionist.
Her eyes flicked up at me and her lips pressed into a tight line. "You're in 409?
"Yeah." She hesitated before saying, "There shouldn't be anyone on that floor but you."
I frowned. "What about the other rooms?" "They're closed for maintenance," she said, looking past me at the empty lobby. "If it happens again, call the front desk immediately."
The third night, I did something stupid. I set my phone to record audio before I went to bed, just to see if I could catch whatever it was. Sure enough, at exactly 2:11 a.m., the sound started. Slow, dragging footsteps in the hallway. My pulse spiked as they stopped right outside my door. The handle turned once, twice. Then there was a light tap against the wood. Not a knock. Just one soft touch, like someone laying their palm flat against it. I stayed perfectly still, gripping the handle of the heavy brass lamp from the bedside table. Then, a voice, whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it was low and hoarse, right at the edge of the door. I was about to yell when the whispering stopped, replaced by a sound that made my skin crawl. A long, deliberate sniff, like whoever it was smelling the crack of the door. That was enough. The next morning, I went back to the desk and told the receptionist I wanted to switch rooms. She looked relieved, like she'd been waiting for me to say it.
"You're not the first," she said quietly. "But 409 isn't supposed to be rented out at all."
I stared at her. Then why was I put there?
Her eyes darted to the side. "It's complicated." When I pressed her, she shook her head. "It's an old building. Sometimes people linger. Just stay in your new room and you'll be fine."
I moved to the second floor. My new room was smaller, but I didn't care. That night, I finally felt like I'd be able to sleep, but at 2:15 a.m., I woke to the faint sound of footsteps, not in the hallway above me. Room 409 was directly overhead, and right before I turned on the light, I heard it. 3 slow, heavy knocks coming from the floor. Story 2. The gas station attendant. I was the only customer at that gas station, so when the attendant asked me, "Do you want me to walk you to your car?" I realized he was afraid of something, and it wasn't me. It was almost midnight. I'd been driving cross-country for 14 hours and needed caffeine to keep me going. The glowing sign for a gas and go appeared out of nowhere along the empty highway, and I pulled in. The place looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 90s. Buzzing fluorescent lights, 2 lonely pumps, and a convenience store with dusty shelves. The man behind the counter was in his 50s, wearing a faded red work shirt with a name tag that said Carl. He gave me a polite nod when I came in, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the glass doors every few seconds. I grabbed a coffee and some snacks and brought them to the counter. That's when he leaned forward slightly and asked, "Where you headed?" "Seattle," I said, swiping my card. He hesitated before asking, "You traveling alone?" The question felt a little too personal, but I shrugged. "Yeah." Carl's eyes darted again toward the glass doors. "Well, you might want to get back on the road quick." I frowned. "Why?" He didn't answer, just handed me the receipt and said, "Do you want me to walk you to your car?" That's when my stomach tightened. I shook my head. "I'm fine." Carl gave me a long look like he was debating saying more, then quietly said, "Just don't talk to him." I had no idea what he meant, but I wasn't about to stick around and find out. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting me hard. My car was parked right in front of the store. Halfway there, I noticed the smell, faint but distinct, like rotting meat. Then I saw movement. Someone was standing at the far end of the parking lot, in the shadow between 2 flickering streetlights. They weren't moving toward me, just standing there, facing me. At first, I thought it was a homeless guy, but something about the way they were standing was wrong. Perfectly still. Too still. I glanced back through the store's glass door. Carl was at the counter, watching me intently. His lips moved. He was mouthing something. "Get in the car." I unlocked my door and slid in, locking it behind me. When I looked back toward the figure, it was closer. I hadn't heard footsteps. They were just closer. The parking lot light flickered, and I caught a glimpse of the man's face, pale, gaunt, and smiling too wide. His clothes looked wet, hanging heavy on his frame. I turned the key, my hands shaking. As my headlights came on, the man tilted his head and started walking toward me. No, not walking, gliding. I threw the car into reverse and backed out fast. The figure stopped at the edge of the light, just watching me leave. I didn't slow down until I was back on the highway. My heart was still pounding when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a text. No caller ID. Just 4 words. "You shouldn't have left." I didn't stop driving for another 80 miles. When I finally pulled into another gas station, I told myself I'd imagined the whole thing, the man, the smell, the text. But as I got out to pump gas, I froze. Across the lot, under a single flickering light, he was standing there. Same wet clothes, same smile. And this time, he waved. Story 3. The man in the passenger seat. The first time I saw him, he was already in my car. The second time, he smiled. It was a little after 2 a.m. on a Friday in late October. I just finished my bartending shift at a place downtown and was walking to my car in the employee lot a few blocks away. The streets were empty, the air sharp with the kind of cold that makes your ears ache. My feet hurt, my eyes burned, and I was ready to collapse into bed. The lot was dark except for a single yellow streetlight buzzing above the far corner. My car, a 2010 Toyota Camry, was parked near the middle. I hit the unlock button on my key fob, saw the hazard lights blink, and then froze. Through the driver's side window, I saw him. A man. Sitting in the passenger seat. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I blinked hard, adjusted my angle. He didn't move. His head was tilted slightly, face turned toward me, but the darkness made it impossible to see details. My stomach knotted instantly. I took a step back. The only sound was the hum of the streetlight. My key fob was still in my hand. I pressed lock again, nothing. The Camry's lights didn't blink this time. That's when it hit me, my car was already unlocked. I started backing away, scanning the lot for anyone else. It was completely empty. When I looked back at the car, the passenger seat was empty. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light, or maybe I'd seen my own reflection. Finally, I crept forward, phone in hand, flashlight ready. I shone it through the windows, nothing. The interior was exactly how I'd left it. My work bag on the back seat, an empty coffee cup in the holder. The doors were all unlocked. I checked the back seat twice before finally getting in. My hands shook as I locked the doors from the inside. When I started the engine, my headlights flared across the lot and lit up a man standing just outside the glow. Too far to make out clearly, but close enough to know it wasn't my imagination. I drove home fast, checking my mirrors the whole way. My apartment building's parking lot was empty. I ran upstairs, locked my door, and didn't sleep a second that night. The next morning, I told myself it had to have been some drunk who wandered into the wrong car. Creepy, sure, but not supernatural. Not dangerous. By my next shift, a few nights later, the memory had dulled. I parked in a different spot this time, under the streetlight. My shift ended just after 1 a.m., and I walked out with another bartender, Steph. We chatted until she got in her car, then I headed to mine. That's when I saw him again, not in the lot this time, not across the street. He was sitting in my passenger seat. This time, the glow from the streetlight lit his face pale, drawn tight like he hadn't eaten in days, and eyes that didn't blink. His hair was wet, clinging to his forehead. But the worst part was his mouth. He was smiling. It wasn't a normal smile. His lips were stretched too far, exposing too much gum, teeth clenched together like he was holding something back. I stopped dead, my keys halfway to my hand. My breath turned to frost in front of me. I was about to run when his head twitched a tiny sudden jerk. And then his smile widened. I bolted, didn't look back. I ran straight to Steph's car and banged on the window. She jumped, rolled it down halfway.
What the hell?
"There's a man in my car," I gasped. She turned to look, but when I did too, the passenger seat was empty. Again, I was shaking so hard I could barely speak. Steph insisted on walking me back, but of course there was no one there. Doors locked, no sign of forced entry. She thought I was overworked, maybe seeing things. But I knew what I'd seen. The third time wasn't in the parking lot. It was in my driveway. It had been a week since the last incident. I'd taken to checking the back seat every time I got in the car, locking the doors religiously, even while driving. I'd stopped telling people about it. No one believed me anyway. That Friday night, I pulled into my driveway around midnight. My porch light was on, my little apartment above the garage glowing warm and safe. I cut the engine and sat for a moment, scrolling my phone. When I glanced up into the rearview mirror, my heart stopped. He was sitting in the passenger seat. I didn't see him open the door. I didn't hear movement. He was just there. Same wet hair, same pale skin, same stretched, unnatural smile. But this time, he was looking directly at me in the mirror. I couldn't breathe. My hand went to the door handle, but I was frozen, torn between bolting and staying perfectly still. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and put one finger to his lips. I don't remember getting out of the car. I don't remember running up the stairs to my apartment or slamming the door behind me. When I looked out the window a few seconds later, my car was empty. I moved out of that apartment within the month, sold the Camry too, but every now and then, when I'm stopped at a light at night, I'll glance over at the empty passenger seat and swear I can see a faint reflection of him, smiling just for me. Story 4. Under the Porch. The night I realized someone was living under my porch, I had already been hearing them for weeks. It started as small noises, a creak here, a scrape there. I told myself it was the house settling, maybe an opossum digging through leaves. But by the time I could hear breathing, I knew it was something else entirely. I live in a small one-story rental in a quiet neighborhood outside of town. No roommates, no pets. The porch is an old wooden structure built a foot or so off the ground, with just enough space underneath for raccoons, stray cats, or, apparently, people. The first real incident was a Thursday night in late September. I was sitting on my couch with the window cracked open, scrolling my phone, when I heard the slow, rhythmic sound of footsteps on dry leaves. Coming from directly under me, I muted the TV. The footsteps stopped. For a good 30 seconds, I didn't move. Then, when I thought it was over, I heard a faint shh, 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 like someone dragging their fingers along the wood slats beneath the floor. I stood up and peered out the front window, but the darkness under the porch swallowed everything. Eventually, I convinced myself it was an animal. The sound had that uneven quality, like a four-legged creature. Still, I went outside with a flashlight and shined it through the gap at the base of the porch. Nothing. The noises continued every few nights, always after midnight, always under the porch. Sometimes it sounded like scratching, sometimes shuffling. Twice, I heard a weird, low humming, almost like someone singing under their breath. I even called my landlord about it, but he just told me to spray for pests and said the porch had been there since the 60s. It wasn't until the second week that I realized how wrong I'd been. It was 2 a.m., and I'd just gotten up for a glass of water. I'd left the kitchen window open, the one that faces the front yard. As I stood at the sink, I heard it breathing. Not fast or panicked. Slow, steady, human, and it was right outside the window. I froze, my hand still on the faucet. After a few seconds, the breathing stopped. Then I heard a whisper. 2 words, soft but unmistakable. I see you. I dropped my glass, water splashing across the counter. I ran to the front door, slammed it shut, and locked every window in the house. The rest of the night, I stayed in bed with the covers pulled up, listening for any sound. Every creak felt like it was coming from directly beneath me. In the morning, I went outside with my phone camera ready. At first glance, there was nothing. But when I crouched down and looked deeper under the porch, my stomach flipped. There was a pile of blankets in the far corner, a plastic grocery bag with food wrappers spilling out, and in the dirt, a dent where someone's head had clearly been resting. I backed away, already dialing the police. They came within 15 minutes. The officer crouched down, shined his flashlight, and shook his head. "Whoever was here is gone," he said. "Could be a squatter. We see it sometimes." They didn't find any ID. No personal belongings beyond the trash and bedding. The officer suggested I put up chicken wire or a skirt around the porch. That night, I barely slept. 3 days later, it happened again. This time, it was just after midnight. I'd shut all the windows, turned off the lights, and was lying in bed when I heard the faintest creak. From inside the house, I sat up, straining to hear. The sound was coming from the living room right above the section of porch where I'd found the blankets. It was followed by a slow, dragging step. Then, another. Someone was in my house. I grabbed my phone and whispered to 911, giving my address. The operator told me to stay put and keep quiet. I listened as the footsteps moved closer to my bedroom door. Then they stopped. The silence lasted maybe 10 seconds, before I heard that same low humming. It was right outside my room. The front door burst open a minute later as 2 officers rushed in. I heard shouting, heavy footsteps, but when they reached my room, they were alone. They found no one inside. One of them went to check under the porch again while the other asked me questions. When the first officer came back, he was pale. "They're gone," he said quietly, "but they've been watching you." He handed me something wrapped in a latex glove. It was a disposable camera, half-used, the kind you have to develop. When the photos came back a week later, I almost threw up. Half of them were pictures of the underside of my porch. The other half were taken through my windows. Me on the couch, me sleeping, me in the kitchen, pouring water. The last photo was taken from my bedroom doorway. I moved out the next day. I don't know who was living under my porch, or how many nights they watched me without me knowing. But I do know one thing. If you ever hear breathing outside your window at night, don't assume you're alone. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of someone tapping on my hotel window. That wouldn't be strange if my room wasn't on the 12th floor. At first, I thought it was part of a dream. The tapping was light, like fingernails on glass, and it came in sets of 3. I sat up, groggy, my heart already picking up speed. The curtains were drawn, but the faint glow of the city seeped in around the edges. I stared at them for a solid minute, waiting for the sound again. Then it came. Tap, tap, tap. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a branch, even though there were no trees anywhere near this building. I reached for my phone, but before I could check the time again, something moved on the other side of the curtain, a shadow. I froze. The shape was human, but distorted like someone crouching, head tilted, pressing close to the glass. Every instinct told me not to touch the curtain. But I was alone in the room, hundreds of miles from home, and curiosity was eating me alive. I grabbed the curtain edge and yanked it open in one quick motion. Nothing, just the sprawling lights of the city below. My reflection in the glass. I laughed nervously, telling myself I was paranoid, and let the curtain fall back into place. But I didn't sleep much after that. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same tap. Tap, tap. Only this time, when I opened the curtain, I swear I saw something, not a person exactly, but the impression of one. A faint smudge, like the oily outline a hand leaves on glass. I pressed my palm against it, feeling the cold pain beneath. That's when I noticed something impossible. The smudge was on the inside. I checked the lock on the window. It was secure. There was no balcony, no fire escape, just a sheer drop down 12 floors. I barely slept that night, and when I did, my dreams were filled with the sound of tapping. On the third night, I decided to stay awake and catch whoever or whatever was messing with me. I left the lights off, sat in the chair facing the window, and waited. Hours passed. The city outside dimmed as more buildings went dark. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., I saw it. Not through the glass this time, but reflected inside the room, in the faint light from the street lamps. A figure crouched in the corner by the window. I spun around, heart pounding, but the corner was empty. When I looked back at the glass, the reflection was gone. I wanted to call the front desk, but I knew how it would sound. "Hi, I think there's a ghost in my window." So instead, I decided to leave the hotel the next day. I started packing around midnight. At 1:30 a.m., as I shoved clothes into my bag, I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. I ignored it. Then from directly behind me, I heard the whisper. "Don't look." I turned anyway. The window was wide open. I don't remember screaming, but I must have, because hotel security was banging on my door within minutes. They searched the room, the hallway, even the roof. No one was there. The window had no exterior ledge, no rope, no harness. When I checked out in the morning, the front desk clerk gave me a strange look.
You were in 1214, right?
I nodded. Her smile faded.
That room's been vacant for months. We've had reports before. People say they hear someone tapping on the glass.
That was 3 weeks ago. I'm home now. My bedroom window is on the second floor, and there's a big maple tree right outside. But last night, at 3:17 a.m., I woke up to a familiar sound. Tap, tap, tap.